Everybody, we're going to start the second half of the night. Thank you for sticking around with us. Up next, we have the race for House District 42. Joining me today is Rep. Diamond Garcia, right over here on my left in the middle. Next to him is the Democratic challenger, Anthony Mahalo Paris. Thank you both for joining us today. For those of you just coming in or for those of you new to our events, if you have a question for the candidate, grab one of those postcards over there at the front desk, and you can write your question on that. Stick your hand in the air and someone in a Civil Beat shirt will come around and grab that and hand it to me. Don't try to shout out the question because we're recording this event here. And if you do that, the recording won't pick it up. And we want, the thousands of people watching this to see it. We've already got a ton of questions, and I feel like I probably should have brought some Civil Beat applications for you guys since you asked so many questions. But you're making my job easy tonight, so I'm going to start with these audience questions. I've got, look at this. Look, I've got a big stack here. And I promise we're going to get through as much of them as we can tonight so that we can get your questions answered. So this first one, it's about education. And more questions have just come in. This first one is about education. The Department of, and this is for both of you, the Department of Education has ongoing issues such as not paying teachers on time, defective or non-existent fire alarms, and returning funds for not repairing facilities on time. What plans do you have to make the Hawaii DOE and the superintendent accountable and fulfill their commitments for teachers and keiki to have a safe school environment and quality working conditions?
Great question, and thanks to whoever asked that question. Hawaii's DOE. Many folks don't realize that we are the only state in the whole country, out of all 50, we're the only state that has one school board that governs all 260 plus schools statewide. In most states, you have elected school boards where the people in various communities elect who they want to represent them on those boards, and those boards then govern the type of education that is being implemented within those various districts. Hawaii, that's not happening here. They're not only is there just one board, they're all appointed positions by the governor. They used to be elected, but they're all appointed. And so what we see here is a decline in the quality of education. For a long time, Hawaii has had low test scores. There's been incompetence within the DOE with spending money appropriately that's been allocated to fix classrooms, to put AC into classrooms. They actually forgot to spend the money this past year. Recently, teachers have been waiting for weeks upon weeks not getting paid. That is unacceptable. And for far too long, we've enabled our superintendents, the Board of Education, to simply be people who are rubber stamps for whatever the governor wants. It's time to implement elected school boards, and that is why I co-sponsored legislation for the last 2 years, which would have implemented elected school boards, one per county across this state, giving the power back to the parents and families in those communities to govern the schools for their children.
Akano?
Aloha po mehana kako o Anthony Makana Paris ko o inoa. It's like mai nana kuli mai iau no mau me ku'u tutu, me ku'u makua, me ku'u aikane I kapole kia manawa. So aloha everyone. My name is Anthony Makana Paris. I hail from the west side, born and raised in Nanakuli on Papaya Road and Hakimo. Went to Nanakuli Elementary School and currently live here in the beautiful Kapolei. So regarding schools, I think the first thing we need to remember about this unified system is we have to go back to our mo'oku auhau, our genealogy, and understand that the unified school system was created in the Hawaiian Kingdom in 1840 by His Majesty King Kamehameha III. And it was Maka'olelo Hawaii, Hawaiian language. And our people was the most literate. They were the most akamai. They were transliterating things from across the world. But it was through the unlawful overthrow and the annexation, so-called, of Hawaii into the United States Empire that we found ourselves with racist policy that outlawed our language and then caused everything under that unified system for now actually generational trauma that we have to deal with today. I don't think it's a matter of a unified system. I think it's a matter of funding and us remembering where we come from and the values that we put forward. Now, in 2004, Act 51 was created to try and bring more voice of the local communities into the school system, the Reinventing Education Act. And they established school community councils in which parents and teachers and administrators were able to go and talk stories similar to what other school boards do in other school districts across the United States of America. And they have mandatory reporting of all of the 256 odd school districts. But how many actually put in reports? Only 51. 51 of them put in reports this past legislative cycle. What does that tell me, looking at this? 51 schools, we had active participation where people were trying to engage at the local level. But they already have the opportunity to do that in all 200 some, but they're not. Because I believe our community members, our family members are too busy surviving, trying to actually engage in the school system as it is right now. So if we shift midstream and go from a unified system to localized school boards, it's going to be a monumental effort. I believe that we should relook at Act 51 for the last 20 years and see what are the best practices and lessons learned we have, and then try to make incremental progress moving forward. Mahalo.
Makana, I'm hearing you talking about these community school councils, and Diamond, you're bringing up elected school boards, and disaggregating is probably the wrong word, but separating the Department of Education, decentralizing the Department of Education. But both of these things, even if they were implemented, would take a long time. And obviously, Makana, as you pointed out, not all of the community school councils are reporting. What is something specific that you could do right now if you're, if you make it through to the next session? What's something that you would introduce next session to improve the quality of schools? More immediately, yeah, both of us. And I'll start with you, Rep. Garcia.
Well, the fact is there needs to be accountability first with teacher pay. What we saw these last 2 months where the DOE failed to pay teachers out on time, I was at the forefront on this, and I'm a member of the Education Committee in holding the DOE and DAGs accountable for payroll. That's important. But number two, what's more important is the quality of education. Hawaii has a very low quality of education. The evidence of that is our test scores. We constantly rank bottom constantly. So what we have to do is introduce legislation that holds the admin accountable. And how do we do that? I firmly believe, Blaze, that is through elected school boards. Why? Because the power lies in the communities, not in Keith Hayashi, not in the BOE that's appointed by the governor. It lies with the people. And that's how you improve the quality of education.
Makana, what would you do more immediately to improve the quality of schools?
So hands down, the one thing that we can do to improve our educational system and the quality of education is to properly fund it. We have been underfunding our educational system since the birth of this state. Per capita, with federal, state, and local funding, it's like Hawaii ranks near the bottom, if not last, on how much we spend per pupil. And administratively, we actually save more by having a unified system. Our issue with administrators not being able to do their job a lot of times has to do with the dozens and dozens upon vacancies because we have salary schedules that don't actually raise with the cost of living. Before, people wanted to have state jobs and county jobs because it was a guaranteed pay with awesome retirement benefits and health care. Today, you have to actually have your state and county job and work part-time on the side or retire 10 years after the fact, because our system has not kept up with the rise with the cost of living. And the rise of cost of living is complicated. It's more than just inflation. You actually tag into the issues of real estate markets, and Hawaii is actually the playground for the rich. Our real estate is actually on the market mostly with po'ehaole, those from America, those from the 48 contiguous states buying up land here, driving prices up, while local families, local community members are paying their taxes, their fees, their sewage fees, their road fees on the infrastructure around it, while somebody that's an absentee landlord is the one that's able to actually collect on the appreciation of those properties. So one thing we need to do, fund the Department of Education. And one of the ways we can help increase funding is an empty hole surcharge on all of the taxes for the entire state, for all of these people that are having this property here as a real estate investment and just watching their dollars climb, while the rest of us are watching our pockets bleed out. Mahalo.
Just a quick response. As you can tell, guys, my opponent and I are quite opposite on this. His solution to solving Hawaii's problems in the DOE is raise taxes. That's not the solution. The problem is the government is the problem. In fact, the DOE takes the largest portion of our state budget every single year, goes right to the DOE. So funding isn't the problem. It's how we're using those funds, and is the legislature following those funds and holding the superintendent, the board accountable, and making sure that those funds get into the classrooms where they belong.
Rep. Garcia, we're staying with you for this next audience question. They're saying that you voted no on free school lunches during the 2024 legislative session. Do you still stand by that?
Yes, I do, and here's why. Being someone who was born and raised with free school lunch, I know the struggle. Free school lunch is there for those families who cannot afford it. And the question itself is actually a faulty question, because I didn't vote against free school lunch. I voted against expanding the eligibility requirements for free school lunch. That's a big difference. I believe those families who can't afford school lunch have that service available. I was one of those kids who was brought up on free school lunch. Okay, but for those families who can't afford it, it is their kuleana, it is their children, and the taxpayers of this state should not be funding free school lunch for all kids if their parents can afford it.
And Makana, your thoughts on the expansion of free school lunches?
So I'll get to free school lunches first, but the first I would like to address is my colleague here, Mr. Garcia, wanted to speak for me. But you don't need to listen to him because I'm here to speak for myself. Okay? So let's clarify my position on taxes. I think all of our visitors to these islands need to be paying their fair share. I think everybody generating wealth off of our islands that don't live here, that don't generate income here, that don't actually raise their kids here, they should be paying their fair share. I'm not saying we should raise taxes on our local people. In fact, I'm in support of eliminating the income tax so that we can actually make sure that those people in these islands.
I've got more questions about taxes later on, and I do want you to talk about that, your entire tax plan, when we get there. But I wanted you to address the question first on free school lunches. What are your thoughts on the expansion?
Oh, thank you. Well, if that's the case, then could you moderate and make sure that someone else is not speaking for me?
We were just letting him respond briefly to what you said, but could you answer the question on free school lunches, and we'll get back to taxes in a bit.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So regarding free school lunches, if it wasn't for free school lunch, I wouldn't have been able to actually probably survive most of my elementary school life. I come from a blue-collar family. I was houseless for a period of time in my life, and school was the only place where I knew had caring adults that I could go to, where I could actually get food for actually eat. Now, when we look at data-driven analysis of who's actually committing crimes in our society today, it's those people that weren't invested in their early age, from food, safe space, education. So I rather spend our dollars on the front end with our keiki and make sure that they have the best chance for success as possible, rather than spending dollars in putting someone in jail because they made difficult life choices. So the question is, where are we going to put the funding in order for actually come down hard on somebody later on in life because of the fact that they and their family was dealt a raw hand? Or are we a society in which we want to take care of the least of us, take care of the widow and the orphan, to make sure that everyone actually can make a life of success here in the Aloha Islands called Hawaii?
Makana, I'm actually going to stick with you because we are talking about taxes now, and you've both stated that you support eliminating parts of or completely eliminating income tax in Hawaii, but pairing it with other initiatives. Could you explain your approach, Makana?
So what I think is, it's easy for us to just poke at one tax or this tax, from property tax to the car tax to the fees on sewage. Everybody gets hit differently. But what we don't do, and what we don't usually have time, is to look at the whole system as a whole. Where is the money coming from and where is it going? One thing that is very clear to me looking at the information that we have available is our tourists are not paying their fair share. With all of the flushes that they come in, 10 million tourists odd come into our islands a year. It's part of our economic base. And I support that as long as it's pono. But what we're not doing is making sure that they provide their fair share. Now, income tax is only on those that live and reside in these islands. I want to make sure that those people that are generating wealth here that also pay out for their sewage fees, their car registration, the roadway upkeep, that all of the real estate brokers and outside investors actually take advantage of because there's no fee for them. The people that pay general excise tax for the ongoing costs of our schools. But we have a one-time shot that the current tax regime hits developers up for the building of new infrastructure in schools. Like in our region in Kapolei and Eva, our schools are over 200% capacity. And this is supposed to be the master plan second city. But because of our tax regime that focuses on providing trickle-down economics, all of our local families are suffering. So I believe in comprehensive tax reform and making sure that our visitors, real estate trusts, and outside investors just pay just like everybody else. Why should they get a break? Why should we give them a break, but not the kid that's starving? That keiki, we have kuleana too. These outside investors, we don't. Mahalo.
Rep. Garcia, your approach to taxes?
Well, thank you. I'm going to answer your question. And the question was regarding income tax specifically. My answer to that is yes, I fully support abolishing the state income tax. In fact, I've co-introduced legislation these last 2 years to do exactly that. Unfortunately, the Democrats in charge have refused to even schedule the bill for a hearing. And this was a minority caucus package bill, which would have abolished the income tax completely. Now, however, this year, there was a massive income tax reduction bill that passed. And this, within 5 to 7 years, Hawaii will then become the fourth lowest income tax state in the country. So did I vote yes on that? 100%. Was it a good bill? Yes, but it doesn't go far enough. I believe that it's time to abolish the income tax 100% completely. There are other states like Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, elsewhere where they have no income tax. And guess what? The greatest fear put forth by the opposition across the aisle is that we're going to somehow lose all this revenue and we won't have enough money to fund our schools and our police officers. Well, guess what? When they abolished the income tax, Florida, Texas, etc., they actually raked in more revenue. Because why? The economy was stimulated, more people were spending money, jobs were created, and in turn, the government raked in more revenue. It's a win-win.
Outside of the income tax, I was sort of curious how that fits in with your just general approach to taxes and any other tax proposals that you have.
Yeah, I believe in less taxation. Hawaii is the second highest tax state in the entire country. Why? Because we've had one party in charge of the state for 70 years. It's time to reduce the tax burden on our local families. It's common sense.
We're going to move on to the economy. Sticking with you, Rep. Garcia, for this question. You've advocated for increasing the film tax credits. They're currently capped at $50 million annually. Economists have argued that film studios will come here to shoot because it's Hawaii and not because of the credits necessarily. Do you think the economic benefits of the film tax credits outweigh the costs of the program?
Well, obviously, their arguments haven't worked because look at just what happened. NCIS gone, Hawaii Five-0 gone. All these local movies that were being filmed here, if they were here for Hawaii, they'd still be here. But what they can do now is go to Georgia or New Jersey, where their tax credits for the film industry is pretty incentivizing, and with AI, with modern technology, they can recreate Hawaii in a film studio. And so what we have to do is be smart about it and incentivize those companies, the film industry, to come to Hawaii by lifting those tax credits. I've I've supported and introduced measures to indeed do that, to lift those film tax credits. But also, in our district, guys, we have a jewel. At UH West Oahu, in the last 5 years or so, a new center opened up called the Academy for Creative Media Arts Center. That's a jewel that we have. We should be incentivizing the film industry to come to West Oahu, build film studios next to UH West Oahu or somewhere near our district, so we can actually create jobs. And then all those kids who actually graduate can go right into a good paying job with full benefits. That's a win-win.
The state gets back the state gets back in tax revenues about 52 cents for every dollar it puts into the film tax credit. Do you think that the broader economic impact is worth the cost to the state?
Definitely.
Makana, I want to ask you about vertical farming. You mentioned that in your candidate Q&A for us. You said that vertical farming, you proposed that as a way to increase food security in Hawaii. Vertical farming requires heavy upfront investment and often involves huge energy costs to sustain once it's running. How would Hawaii be able to implement vertical farming at a scale that could produce enough food?
So, vertical farming. The crown jewel of vertical farming is the small area of Singapore in the South Pacific. Similar to us, landlocked, away from Malaysia and Indonesia proper, they have a very small population, but they do two things. They invest heavily in their people through their education, and they invest in innovation. They trust their people to produce more with less. So when we look at vertical farming at the industrial levels, there's models out there. But on the pragmatic level, like for the farmers that exist right now, we just need to get out of the way and allow them to do vertical farming right in their garages and backyards. Because you don't need a whole lot of technology to actually do it. I'm not talking about hydroponics. I'm just talking about the fact that we have great weather, great climate, and you can put one plant in one place, or you can put 10 if you actually put them in one teepee.
I mean, are you talking about providing state support for those smaller farmers to do that?
What we do have right now is regulations that actually disincentivize innovation in agriculture, where it's based on the plantation model where we're doing crops like pineapple, and we're doing crops like sugarcane. The infrastructure is for that type of model, but we are not providing dedicated funding or support for the infrastructure for small-scale vertical farming or industrial-scale vertical farming. That's currently non-existent.
We've alluded to this in a couple of the questions and answers that you folks have talked about, but I did want to address government efficiency directly. Now, Rep. Garcia, you've said that you want to identify underperforming areas of government and reallocate funding accordingly. Have you identified any underperforming areas, and if so, what are they?
Yes. Well, first of all, there's lots of waste within the Department of Education. So like I had mentioned, we spend a bulk of our budget towards the DOE. We have a very big disproportion between the funding that's being used with administrative costs versus classroom costs. I believe it's time to cut funding in the administration. You know, these complex area superintendents during COVID got a big pay increase. And they're working at home or working remotely. There's lots of fat to cut in government spending. DOE is the main one of them. Second, you know how many vacant positions there are in state government that's already been fully funded? The money is there, but they're just not hiring people. There's close to 1,000 vacant positions right now in our state. How about we, if they're not being used, cut those positions so we can actually give the money back to the people of Hawaii. There's lots of waste in government, please.
Makana, in addressing government efficiency, you've talked about government procurement. Particularly, the procurement system is decentralized with each of the counties, the UH, the DOE, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive branch agencies all operating on their own procurement systems. You want to see a statewide integration of procurement. How would you do that, and what do you envision?
So We can take a lesson from other unified systems of procurement, including the federal government. And one of the things they do is they track bad actors. Those companies that got a government contract and then they screwed up. They put in a change order. So their bid of $9 million now is going to cost $10.1 million because they forgot something critical. And then another change order, and another change order. Does this sound familiar? It's a story that we know of for Hawaii's mass infrastructure called rail. So it comes down with procurement. So everybody's focused on taxes, but we're not concerned about how we actually spending. Shouldn't we actually look at who we're giving these contracts to? And then if they do a bad job, don't let them get the contract the next time. For me, that's a simple thing. So one thing we can currently do is ask all of the departments to flag bad actors and then put it into a central database so that people then will know not to choose them for the next contract.
This is just a reminder for those of you who just walked in, or if you have an audience question, if you have a question for the candidates, grab one of these postcards. They're there in the front desk, and you can fill that out, and someone in a Civil Beat shirt will come around and grab those and hand it to me. And this audience question is for both of you. What is your education and background that qualifies you to serve as a state rep?
I will verse. Well, I was born and raised here in Hawaii, a product of our DOE system. Went to Waikele Elementary, Waipahu Intermediate. And then I went to Hawaiian Mission Academy for my high school years. Had a great time. It was a Christian private school education. And from that education, I was able to have wonderful opportunities to travel across the world and speak at various events and meet other people, and actually teach some classes at our other adjunct colleges like Weimar University recently, Heartland College on the East Coast. But my education here locally is I'm a proud graduate and alumni of Hawaiian Mission Academy. There's two former state reps, or three actually, that have graduated from Hawaiian Mission Academy: Governor John Waihe'e, former Rep David Pendleton, and myself.
Nice. And Makana?
I'm a golden sunshine. I went to Nanakuli Elementary School. But more importantly, I sat at the feet of my kupuna and the makua. I didn't know that people only had one set of parents until I went to Kamehameha schools and I dormed at the Kapalama campus, because I had the makua and the kupuna that taught me how to fish, and I had the makua and kupuna that taught me how to farm, and I had the kupuna and the makua that taught me how to hunt. It's like I am versed in the ways of our Hawaiian culture and traditions, but my family saw, and the kupuna saw, that I had a penchant with the palapala, or books. In elementary school, I was a product of Chapter 1. For those that don't know, it's akin to today's special education, because they thought I was lolo, I was stupid, because I didn't integrate and engage well with the American system of education that we were getting. But it was thanks to Japanese teachers that took the time to help me to understand how my worldview as a Kanaka, a person rooted in this place, intersected with the system that it was the DOE. Then I flourished. I went into GT, I went off to Kamehameha schools, and I'm a proud graduate and a beaver because I graduated from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I have degrees in environmental science and engineering. And I came home afterwards to do work in our community. But because of the fact that there were still outstanding issues and concerns, my community asked me to go and get higher education from there. So I did. I studied at the seminary called the Jesuit School of Theology at Santa Clara with the Jesuits, a pontifical faculty, one of 4 in the world. Then, afterwards, I came back home again to try and do work in our community where we're sticking on education. But they told me not enough yet, because when we started to do work in our community, I sat on one too many boards in which there was a lawyer that said you couldn't do something because of liability. And instead of helping us to find creative ways to make it so we can do, they told us no can. And when I argued with them and brought before them evidence and tried to make a convincing argument, they said no. Ultimately, they said, you don't know any better because you're not barred and you don't have a degree in law. So my kupuna said, boy, you can fix that. You good with the pala pala. So I'm a proud Richardson graduate from the University of Hawaii's own Richardson School of Law. So I stand before you, a golden sunshine, a beaver, a rainbow, and a Jesuit, trained scholar. All of this education doesn't compare to the wisdom that I receive from my elders. It doesn't. And I was one anecdote when I was at seminary, when I was sharing about how the divine already existed in Hawaii prior to the arrival of the missionaries. That God never come to these shores because somebody came to proclaim that divine, that there was already here. And that was what my thesis work was. I did it by interviewing kupuna across these islands. Ethnographic studies.
Makana, I don't mean to cut you off, but I have to get to some more audience questions in the time that we have. This next question is for both candidates. The audience member wants to know, how much empathy do you have for the homeless?
I have great empathy for our unsheltered neighbors and brothers and sisters, for I was once one of them. My family was. And we still engage with them on the west side of Oahu. My dad, when he go holo holo and go fishing, we always go and help out. But I want to be very clear about our unsheltered community. For the Kanaka and the locals that are born and raised here, they're not homeless. This aina is their home. They just no more on roof and plumbing. And that's what the rest of us can help out with. We can help them up and give them a hand up when they're down and out. Mahalo.
I have lots of empathy for our houseless individuals. Why? Because like Makana, I too was also houseless for a time being. During my senior year, actually, my mom was evicted from public housing program. And, it takes time to find a new place to come up with the deposit and all that stuff. And so for some times I was couch surfing, and this was right after high school. And so I currently have brothers who is on the street, homeless today, who is addicted to various substances. And so I definitely have empathy. But I also believe that this state of Hawaii for far too long has enabled the problem instead of empowering those individuals to rise up and become successful. It's often talked about these kauhale programs. That's not the solution to homelessness. Kauhale is not the solution. It's a temporary Band-Aid fix. The solution to housing goes much deeper, and that comes with education. It comes with mentorship. It comes with a strong family unit. All this ties into someone's choices, which they make, which can lead to either destruction or prosperity, righteousness.
This next question is about housing. Makana, you wrote in your candidate Q&A that one of the drivers of the economy should be investment in home construction. What kind of investment should the state be making in that area?
I think hands down that our state needs to actually put both resources and land towards affordable public rentals that does not become privatized. Long-term, affordable public rentals. Because not every family has the financial means to actually pay for a down payment on an average costing $1 million house. It's going to take a generation in order to actually get enough extra money to do something like that. So if we're serious about making sure that our community has places that's affordable to live, we have to put our resources there. And the second is very simple. We need to fully fund the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, because right now the state is stealing from Hawaiians. That's their money. That's their land. But for far too long, we think that we should be able to use these resources away from the community that we demonize because they're the ones that's put on top of the newscasts when we're looking at the houseless faces. The fact is, they're wards of the state, the federal, state, and Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So I want to make sure that we just put the resources and allocate it directly where it's needed. 28,000 plus Native Hawaiian families on the waiting list. It is the legal means by which we can legally preference to make sure local families get housed in the islands.
That's a good segue into some of the next audience questions. I got a couple questions about DHHL. This question is for both of you. Do you support gaming on DHHL lands, and if not, why?
If they mean by gaming illegal gaming establishments, definitely not. If they also mean
I think they meant like the establishment.
casinos,
Yes, yeah.
on Hawaiian
like the proposal
homelands,
from a few years
I'm
ago.
a strong no on that one. I don't believe that we should be building casinos on Hawaiian homelands. When Prince Kohio got passed in 1920, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act signed into law in 1921. It set aside, it sanctified 208,000 acres of land for the Hawaiian people. What was it for? For the rehabilitation of the race. Building casinos is not the rehabilitation of the race, nor is it putting Hawaiians in housing. The other side likes to make the argument about all this revenue coming in so that we can eventually clear the wait lists. The problem isn't a massive need for revenue. The problem is what we need is the political will in this state to fulfill their fiduciary duties and complete the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. We don't have to build casinos to do that. It takes the will of the legislature, the governor, in conjunction with the U.S. Congress to make sure that they fulfill this act, which is over 100 years. And I can say this also, 70 years of one-party rule in this state. Our wait list is 29,000 Hawaiians on a wait list. Less than 10,000 leases have been awarded in over 100 years. Prince Kohio, who passed this, was our first Republican congressman who fought for the Lahui. It's time to bring a two-party system back in this state and truly work to fulfill the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act.
Makana, your thoughts on casinos on DHHL lands?
So I'm very supportive of gaming as a revenue generator. Why? Because we have casinos already here in the islands. They're all over the place. We have kupuna that's flying to Vegas and Reno annually. What we don't have is the resources to mitigate the problems that those illegal operations in the black market is already happening in our community. Human trafficking, it's like gun violence. It's already there. Just in Verona Village, we had a bust of an illegal game room being set up just a week ago. So to act like it's not happening and carte blanche prohibition is going to work, I think we've learned from history. The United States of America tried to prohibit alcohol. Never worked out because it just went underground. And it still happened. So I'm for responsible gaming, exploring what that looks like, and make sure that we mitigate the ill effects that comes from that already exists in our community, including shoring up resources for our police force, shoring up resources for victims of domestic violence, shoring up resources for all of those people that are actually caught in human trafficking right now. Because we cannot squeeze more life out of a pohaku. That's dry. We need other economic drivers. And I think gaming deserves a fair and solid look.
Makana, I want to stick with you for a follow-up. In the current legislature, it'd be hard to get any organized gaming bill passed. What are some other ways to get DHHL money? You know, the commission this year is asking for about $600 million from the state for lot development. What are some other revenue streams that could go toward them?
We can help DHHL get those revenues, going back to empty home surcharge. taxing responsible use, recreational marijuana, looking at the proposed creative media productions for film industry in West Oahu. Very supportive of that. But wasn't mentioned was the need for post-production facilities. It's one thing to come shoot in Hawaii. It's another thing to stay here because you have the infrastructure to actually do the appropriate edits at the technical level that exists in places like Georgia. We don't have the facilities, so we need appropriate public-private partnerships in order to actually ensure that the infrastructure exists to attract that type of new industries to these islands. But for DHHL, the question for me is an ethical one. Do we continue to steal from the Hawaiians or not? And mine is, I will always vote for to fully fund it from the general funds because they've had enough time. Everybody else has had enough time to actually be cared for by the Hawaiian community and carried by them for so long. But innovative projects, I support things like Kamakana Ali'i and using targeted special lands from the department, so long as the commission is willing, because they're autonomous, to support them to make sure that they can bring in revenues. Kamakana Ali'i is currently slated at bringing in probably the $4 or $5 billion in its lifetime. That's more money than the state legislature has allocated to the Hawaiian Homes Commission and DHHL for the last decade. And that's something that they're doing on their own. So part of me is saying, let's empower them to do things like this and get out of their way.
Rep. Garcia, same question on funding for DHHL.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, the State House and Senate appropriated $600 million. This was the largest appropriation to Hawaiian homelands since statehood, which is a good thing. That was a step forward in the right direction. However, right now, the department is coming back to the ledge and asking for more money, practically the same amount, to continue with their operations and building and expansion. Do they need money? 100%. You know, I just find it so insulting that the department would hand out leases to non-Hawaiians to be on Hawaiian homelands for like $1 a year. That makes no sense. Why are we handing out leases to non-Hawaiians that pay practically nothing? That doesn't make sense to me. Charge them full market rent. Also, number two, here's the biggest way to get full funding to Hawaiian homelands. Congress. We have to realize that the department was established via an act of Congress. This is a federal act. What we need is a strong congressional delegation who can work with Congress in both the House and Senate, and even talk to the White House, the president, to make sure that they understand it is their fiduciary duty also to fulfill this act, and they haven't done that. They haven't done that. So it's time for we the people to hold them accountable, but also hold our congressional leaders accountable. Mazie Hirono, Brian Schatz, Ed Case, Joe Tokuda. Got to hold them accountable to go to DC and bring funding back home for us.
When you're talking about the leases, these are commercial leases, right, that are getting $1.
Yes.
Not homestead leases.
Not homestead leases. Right. Commercial leases, and then also some like farming leases, solar farms on Hawaiian homelands here in Kalaeloa. Why are we building solar farms, which I don't know why they even call it farming. It's not farming. Solar farms when we could be having Hawaiians living on that land. That doesn't make sense to me.
I know some are paying more than $1, but I don't know that it's at market rate just yet. But I did want to stick with you because I did have a question about leases. You brought it up in your candidate Q&A. You wanted to enable DHHL beneficiaries to leverage their lease for a mortgage loan. I'm sort of like, I want to get more on your thinking on that.
Sure, yes. So this is what we call, so the Hawaiian home lease is an archaic lease. It's not like most leases, standard leases, long-term leases. When you have a long-term lease, say you are awarded a non-Hawaiian homelands lease, a standard market lease for say 50 years or 100 years, the length of that lease qualifies you for equity. That's a standard lease. With Hawaiian homelands, there is no equity to that lease. And it's not 50 years, it's not 60 years, it's a 99-year lease. There should be equity. If we simply change the Hawaiian Homes lease and allow equity, this would give waitlisters, once they are awarded the lease, they can take that 100-year lease to the bank and immediately they'll qualify for a mortgage loan to get them into a house. The main reason why people aren't being housed is because when their names are called, guess what? They can't qualify for a mortgage loan. Bad credit, they all have bills and all kinds of stuff because Hawaii is so expensive. But if we empower the lease by giving it equity like other standard long-term leases, we can get Hawaiians into their homes immediately once they're built.
This is one last question on DHHL, and I'll start with you, Makana. Do you support the development of rental projects on DHHL lands?
Yes, I'm very supportive of rental homes on Department of Hawaiian Homelands. For the simple fact of what my colleague, Mr. Garcia, articulated well. A lot of our community members are unable to afford turnkey mortgages. But that's the thing. We don't just have to have turnkey mortgages. The old homesteads like Nanakulea and Papakolea, they built their own homes. It was sweat labor and equity. Now, one thing I heard was that we can use standard leases. But the problem with standard leases is that it will encumber part of the public trust set aside for Native Hawaiians. Every other lease, if you get bankrupt, they can come after you and take your land. The problem is, if we allow long-term leases to be encumbered by outside financial institutions, then they're going to eat away at the public land corpus. They're going to eat away at the land that Native Hawaiians have held in trust, not just for the Hawaiians of today, but the Hawaiians 7 generations from now. So what we can look at is not just the equity in the land, but the equity in the structures. So there's something there. We could look at how do we make sure we leverage the department in such a way to be able to do loans on a secondary market for Native Hawaiian families. So that if in a financial crisis, they have to take away the house and the lease is encumbered, it goes to another Hawaiian family, not on the open market, but in the secondary market that's regulated through the department, which is not happening right now. It's not. And all we need to do is give some guidance and then allow the commission, the ingenuity, because they get smart people over there, to go figure it out. So yes, I support rentals, and I support making sure that the land that was set away for Native Hawaiians is available for 7 generations. Mahalo.
Rep. Garcia, your thoughts on rentals on DHHL lands?
Yes, thank you for the question. No, I don't support rentals, and here's why. You know why? Because the purpose of the commission is to get waitlisters off of the wait list. When you put someone into a rental unit, and granted, they do need rentals for affordability, but when you put someone into a rental unit, their name isn't getting off the wait list and a lease isn't being awarded. That defeats the whole purpose. Now, what I do support is rent-to-own concepts. So here's what you do. They can't afford to buy a house or rent. But in that contract that they sign when they start renting that unit or that house, the contract states in 10 years, after you rent for 10 years, you will be given this opportunity to purchase the home. And you now have 10 years to build your credit, to save for a down payment, to build yourself up. That makes sense. But also, when they start the rental agreement, and that whole process, in my opinion, that needs to be contingent upon them being awarded a lease. Why? Because we have kupuna who's on the wait list who could die in 2 years or 3 years and 4 years. And what happens if they're renting and then they die? Their kids get nothing. We have to award the leases out to clear the wait list.
This is another audience question for both of you. What is your stance on diversity, equity, and inclusion and the LGBTQ community? How will you make your constituents feel welcomed and not shunned?
Diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI as they call it. The fact is, Hawaii is very diverse. We've been diverse for a long time. We don't need these mainland higher education PhDs to come in and tell us, oh, you must have this diversity, equity, inclusion. We are a diverse culture. We are equitable, and we are inclusive. So DEI, I'm all for DEI, but I'm not for this woke agenda that's being pushed in our colleges, universities, our public school systems, which attacks the very fabric of our state, and that is the family unit. So I don't support the commonly used term DEI because we don't need it, because Hawaii is diverse. We are equitable and we are inclusive.
Makana?
So, do I support diversity, equity, and inclusion? Yes. Because if I didn't, then I would be denying who I am. I have parents that are not all one thing. And to be honest, most of us are too. I'm Samoan, I'm Hawaiian, I'm Chinese, I'm German, I'm Irish. And I come from a community that shared not tolerance, but acceptance. Growing up in the faith community of St. Rita's helped me to recognize one thing, is that everyone has their walk. And who am I to judge someone else's? When I went off to college and I wanted to explore outside of the Catholic faith into the evangelical community, the elders of my church, the priests, they got together, they prayed, and they said, bless you. Go. Go and see what you can learn from this other faith community and tradition. So I did. And when it comes to our LGBTQIA plus community, I'm with you. I'm here for you. I'm your ally. Because far too many voices in our community will shut you down and make you look like that you are a problem, but you are not. For those people that are saying to you that you are a sin, that you are a problem, that you are a heathen, may it be known that you are simply the lesson for those persons to grow more humility and aloha. You be the light in our community that you need to be for the rest of us. So I stand with you, and wherever you see me, I'll be there for a hug, a handshake, or a nod. So mahalo.
This next question is from the audience. It's for both of you. It's on public safety. Would you support stand your ground laws? Why or why not?
100%. And guess what? Not only do I support stand your ground laws, I actually introduced stand your ground laws. But unfortunately, the Democrats in charge refused to hear the bill. And this isn't a partisan issue because both Democrats and Republicans have introduced stand your ground laws. And I believe this is common sense, which means if your life or your family's life is in imminent danger, you have the right to use lethal force to protect yourself and your family. This is common sense. Common sense. So I definitely support stand your ground laws. Most states, in fact, a lot of states have stand your ground laws, and it's about time Hawaii rise to common sense and empower their citizens to protect themselves. With the rise in crime, with the shootings and stabbings and all that stuff, with the brazen robberies and burglaries and assaults, we need a stand your ground law here in Hawaii, and it's time for our citizens to start exercising their Second Amendment rights.
Makana, your thoughts on the stand your ground proposals?
So I'm open to having the discussion on stand your ground because growing up on the West Side, when somebody act up, get scrapped. The question is, I grew up in such a way where after you and scrap, you guys shook hands and you moved on. The key point here is the person was still alive. With stand your ground laws, the person that you're having a disagreement with might not still be alive. My understanding of our current statute is that you can defend yourself in a court of law if you're being eminently threatened by someone else. So nothing needs to be changed right now. And regarding gun control and gun laws, part of the issue we have is the lack of social services and funding. The fact that we're looking at lethal weapons and using them in our community is a sign of a greater problem. My focus would be, how do we make sure we get resources to our kids to make sure that they're not the ones pulling guns on somebody to try and make sure that something's happening. We need to increase our programming and care for those that actually might end up in a situation where they have to use lethal violence so that someone else now has to make the choice of whether or not to kill. Mahalo.
Rep. Garcia, you've mentioned a lot of bills that you've introduced in the last 2 sessions. A lot of them don't get hearings and none of them have made it into law. As a member of the House Minority Caucus, how do you effectively legislate knowing that a lot of your proposals won't make it?
Yeah, so the fact is, this is all common knowledge that as a Republican, the likelihood of your bills getting heard and then even passing the full session is pretty slim to none. It happens here and there on nonpartisan issues like mail theft and stuff like that. But when you're talking about a minority caucus package bill or a bill that is ideologically conservative or Republican, of course it's not going to get passed because we have a legislature that's filled with a bunch of liberal Democrats. And Hawaii is not a balanced state. We are the most lopsided legislature in the whole country. There are 51 state representatives, just 6 Republicans, 25 senators, just 2 Republicans. So of course our bills are not going to get passed. I'll tell you this, here's how we will get them passed, is if we come together and elect more Republicans across this state so that we can have a 2-party system. I don't support a 1-party rule, be it Democrat or Republican. We had a 1-party rule prior to statehood. The Big Five ran everything, and that was a pretty disastrous turnout. So I don't support 1-party rule. I support a healthy, vibrant 2-party system where legislation put forth by both parties are equally debated, discussed, and voted on.
Sticking with you for a follow-up, how do you get things passed, though, if you know that the Democrats are in power?
Well, you work with them. For example, I was the only Republican state representative in our area in West Oahu that actually got passed a resolution, and that was H.R. 45 because we worked with Democrats to get it done. And that would install speed mitigation on Kapolei Parkway between Kapolei High School and Kapolei Middle School. That was a bipartisan resol that was passed, and in fact, not one no vote against it. So all the Democrats voted for it. So it just comes down to working with the chairs and having them schedule your bills or resols for a hearing and then seeing it through till it's passed.
Makana, if you're elected into the legislature, you'd be brought into the Democratic majority's fold. Would you push back against House leadership or a committee chair to advocate or pass something that you believe in, that you think is right?
Yes. Because as an elected official of the district, my kuleana is to represent the constituency in which empowered me for the position. But having said that, I find collaboration and working with others on common ground makes it easier for people to actually support more conservative or progressive ideas that you have, because you're building pilina, relationship. Now, I don't have experience of passing bipartisan legislation because I wasn't a legislator yet. But in 2022, I was a part of the hui of over 24 different civic organizations, including an Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs, including environmental groups like Zero Waste and Sierra Club of Hawaii, and the Building Trades Council that got together to make a stand for those people that were disproportionately impacted by Opala, by landfills, which is the west side of Oahu, which was my backyard growing up. How did I do it? I worked with both the Republicans and the Democrats, co-sponsored by Senator Kurt Favela and Senator Kaeli Ikahele. What I can do and bring to the table is pilina with multiple different organizations to be able to work towards a common solution to mitigate most of the problems that we have. Because our community deserves action. And I think action will come by working through Laulima. Mahalo.
Would you push back directly against House leadership if they're telling you to vote on something that you don't agree with?
So the short answer is I will vote my conscience. Why? Because I have to live with myself and my God. So I will vote, and if there's political pushback, so be it.
Rep. Garcia, similarly for you, would you go against the House minority if they took a position you don't agree with?
Absolutely. I've proven time and time again that I'm an independent thinker. I don't follow the leadership of either party, and I don't allow anyone to dictate how I vote. I have conservative principles, so most of my inklings will lean conservative and lean Republican, so it aligns with my caucus, which is why we vote no together on most of everything. Not everything, because we're very different, we're very independent, and so I'm not going to follow, or I don't take orders from nobody in my party that tells me how to vote. No.
One last question for both of you, but stick around because the candidates will be here and you can talk to them, talk story, and ask them more questions. But the last question here for this panel for both of you, what is something you can do right now as a legislator that would improve the quality of life for residents in your district? Like something you would introduce and hopefully pass next session?
Great question. So our caucus has proposed this very bill for like 30 years. Eliminate the general excise tax on our food, our medication, our hygiene products. We are only one of 7 states in the whole country that taxes groceries. Why? Because we have Democrats in charge. That's why. Only one of 7 states. It's time to eliminate that. And that would bring immediate relief to our families. Not no tax credits, which folks have to wait till next year to apply for them. This would give immediate relief. This would save the average family of 4 close to $2,000 a year. On top of that, the governor campaigned on this, if you all remember, during 2022 when he was running for governor. I want to eliminate the GE tax on food. Well, guess what? He won election and nothing happened. Nothing happened. He was stealing our ideas and campaigning on it, and then nothing happens. It's time to I would actually appeal to Governor Green, work with your colleagues to make that happen. This will give immediate relief to our local families right now.
Makana?
So 2 things come to mind that I could work on in this upcoming legislative cycle in order to help our community. The first is to address traffic. Simply by working with my colleagues in the regional area, from Representative Kanani Souza to Representative Hopeful John Clark III, Representative Rose Martinez, in order to put down a regional solution, which is the Makakilo Drive extension. A promise that was made to a community that has been not acted upon for most of my life. And also extending Pahika Street by Eva's own school to Kapolei Parkway. Both of those would increase the quality of life tremendously within our community. And the second is to focus on an emergency disaster area in which our communities can go to if we get a Category 4 or 5 hurricane. We can look at West Oahu, or actually any of our high schools right now, and building the infrastructure there in order to make sure it can withstand hurricanes of high winds, and also allow them to ease the overcrowding of our community at the same time.
Thank you to both of our candidates, Rep. Diamond Garcia, Makana Paris. Thank you for joining us tonight.